So on the third day, Mary went to the tomb. It was early in the morning, and she's by herself. But she's not going to the tomb expecting a miracle. She goes to the tomb early on the third day because she knows how the world works. The dead stay dead, empires always win, and crosses do what crosses were designed to do. Mary is not in the cemetery that morning expecting resurrection. She is there to confirm her worst fear, that this story has ended like all the others did. Jesus, for Mary and the others, he's gone. Reverend Fleming Rutledge, you might know her better as the Beyoncé of the Episcopal Church. She reminds us that no one goes to a cemetery expecting to find the dead raised. We had an egg hunt 2 Saturdays ago. If while the kids were running out there hunting for eggs, people started popping out of the ground, you would have heard at least about it from Arlington Now. If not, you hear about everything from Arlington Now. You heard about it, maybe even cable news. But Fleming, she goes further. Had it not been for the resurrection, we would have never heard about this crucifixion. Jesus would have just been another Jewish man who had been killed by the Roman Empire. He would have been another failed movement, another body that had been buried and forgotten, lost in time, which is what Mary expects when she goes to the tomb on the third day. And if we're being honest, and remember, you're in church, and it's Easter Sunday, so you really got to be honest today. That's how many of us showed up here this morning. We didn't show up in a garden tomb, but we showed up with headlines that have been echoing in our minds, or worse, buzzing in our pockets while we are in worship. There's an old rule in journalism that if it bleeds, it leads. The worst news, the worst of the worst, is what makes it above the fold. Kids, that means it's at the top of your feed. It's the first alert that you see on your phone when you wake up in the morning. Many of us are greeted every day by bad news. And after a while, you're not just reading the news anymore, you're beginning to expect that the world is just always that way. We've been trained in bad news. And that's not by accident, because there are systems that depend, that thrive on your fear, on our outrage, and our constant attention. Because fear keeps you clicking, and outrage keeps you watching and scrolling and sharing. And if you can keep people afraid just long enough, you can begin to tell them who is to blame for all the problems in their lives. Which means, by the time we get to Easter morning, by the time we get to today, we don't just expect bad news. We've been discipled into its algorithm. So when Mary shows up at Jesus' tomb early in the morning on the third day, and she sees that the stone has been rolled away, she doesn't think resurrection. She thinks it's even worse than she had imagined. They've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they put him. Of course that's what Mary thinks. Because even in death, the religious powers and the powers of the empire, in her mind, can't leave Jesus alone. Mary turns around and she sees Jesus, but she doesn't recognize him. That's the shock of Easter. She's looking right at the person that she is desperately trying to find, and she can't see him. Which should not be a surprise to us, because we don't have a category in our everyday lives for what we're celebrating today. The resurrection is something that's very hard to explain. Kids, if you want to have fun with your parents today, ask them about today. The resurrection is something that we have difficulty grasping. So when it stands right in front of us, we miss it. Even in its presence, even in the presence of our risen Lord, in all of creation, we are often blind. Mary is looking for a dead Jesus. Dead Jesus is manageable. Dead Jesus we can explain. Dead Jesus fits with her expectations. And you cannot find our living Lord if you only prefer or are prepared for a version of him that stays inside the tomb. Now, before we get too hard on Mary, as a church, us, in like the global church, Big C church, we've done a pretty good job at organizing ourselves around dead Jesus. Dead Jesus is predictable. Dead Jesus does not ask too much of you. Dead Jesus fits neatly into principles and causes and social identities that we carry with us outside of the church. But a living Christ, a living Jesus will put mud on your eyes and send you out into the world with new sight. A living Lord will call you by name and interrupt every assumption you've ever carried with you. A living Jesus refuses to stay put, even if we try to seal the stone in place. So Jesus is standing there in front of Mary. She thinks that he's the gardener, and he asks her, "Why are you weeping?" And it lingers. Not just why are you sad, but what were you expecting to find? And that's the question in John 20 that exposes all of us. Who were you looking for this morning? Inspirational Jesus? Spiritual but not religious Jesus? TED Talk Jesus? A Jesus who will confirm everything you already believe to be true about the world. The late American essayist Joan Didion, she wrote a book titled A Year of Magical Thinking. It won a Pulitzer Prize. Get out your phone now and order yourself a copy. She wrote this book in the months following the death of her husband. The title of the book comes from what anthropologists refer to as magical thinking. That means that it's this quiet, stubborn wishfulness that helps us cope through hard things. That if you just do the right things in the right order, maybe we can hold off the inevitable. Didion names how that showed up in her own grief. She writes about not being able to give away her husband's shoes after he died. Gave away all of his clothes. But because deep down, she thought that if she just held on to these shoes, that he might come back and need them. That's what grief does. It bends our reality just enough to keep hope pointed in the wrong direction. Grief trains your vision. It locks you into a world where absence makes more sense than presence. Mary's not foolish for missing Jesus. She's grieving. She's overcome by grief. And grief has taught her to expect loss and not life. So then Mary sees Jesus. She assumes that he's the gardener, which is odd because he left his burial clothes behind. So where did he get his gardener clothes in between? We don't know. I'll let you all figure out that part of the story. And she's almost right, because resurrection looks ordinary at first glance. She asks him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I will deal with his body." She's still locked into the story she thought she knew. But then everything changes. Not with argument, not with proof, but a name. Mary. One word is all it took, and now she sees. She can see because she is known by him who lives beyond time itself. At that moment, she is a witness to the inauguration of a new world, the inauguration of eternity here on earth. And she says, Rabbunin, which, kids, that means teacher, teacher. The one she thought was dead, long gone, sealed behind a rock, is standing right in front of her. Easter's not only about Jesus being alive, it's about Mary being able to see. It's about you being able to see Jesus for who he really is. And maybe the most honest thing we can do on Easter is not to explain it all away or tidy up this story, but to stand in front of the empty tomb and simply be amazed. But notice that Mary doesn't try to hold on to Jesus. He says explicitly, don't hold on to me. It's like I told the kids, what happens today is not a private spiritual experience. Jesus is not whispering comfort into the ear of Mary and then quietly sending her on her way. Christian ethicist and all-around church curmudgeon Stanley Hauerwas likes to say that the joy of Easter is not just personal, it's social. It is a joy that we share with others, which also means that Easter is not about making a better version of yourself. We live in a world that is obsessed with self-improvement and self-care and self-actualization, a kind of spirituality that really is just a project for managing and improving yourself. But, and we all know that big buts don't lie, that is not Easter. Because the resurrection is not about you becoming better. It's about who Jesus is. And when you meet him, your life changes, but not so that you become the center of your own story. Your life changes so that you can be sent outward to the lives of others. So that Mary's recognition becomes proclamation. I have seen the Lord. Not I had a meaningful spiritual experience and I found inner peace with life and I can move on. No, he lives. He's alive. And you all need to know it. Today's not about quiet comfort. It is a public event and announcement. It is God's claim on the world. It is God declaring that the powers we thought were ultimate, death, violence, fear, and the systems that thrive on them do not get the last word. And that's not a safe message. Because anytime you say Jesus is Lord, you are saying that everything else that competes for your time and your attention and your treasure is not. That's what's disruptive about today. Because today refuses to stay private. It creates new people. You all, whether you know it or not, by being here today, are Easter people. You are a people who have seen our risen Lord and refuse to take bad news as the final word. You all are a people who are going to return to a world addicted to despair, and you're going to dare to say something different. We live in a world that's shaped by what we pay attention to. The more we focus on fear, we see more fear time and time again. The more we fixate on outrage, the more outrage fills our vision. Algorithms feed us more and more of whatever we've clicked on or scrolled through. And before long, it's no longer just a reflection of reality. It begins to define it. So Mary walks to the tomb with a vision shaped by death. So of course she can't see the resurrection. And today is God's interrupting of the algorithm. Not tweaking it, not improving it. This is a divine interruption. With the resurrection, everything, full stop, every corner of creation, every fiber in your being is being made new. Because today is not just a piece of content to fill a story that we believe about the world. It's the end of that story, and it's the beginning of a new one. Not because everything's fixed. Not because the headlines have changed, but because we are beginning, by grace, to see differently. To see that death doesn't hold the last word. To see that the powers of this world do not win. And to see that the one who was gone is very much present and very much calling you right now by name. Easter is not just about Christ being alive. It's about asking for the courage to simply behold and hearken to his glory, knowing the scale at which it exceeds all of us. And once you see Christ, once you see our risen Lord, you don't get to keep him to yourself. You go. You go and you tell. You join Mary with the most subversive, most hope-filled, most reality-altering sentence the world has ever heard. I have seen the Lord. And once you've seen him, you can't go back to seeing the world the same way again. I offer this to you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.